Welcome to NewPointe Online. My name is Meredith, and I work on both our Canton and our campus support teams. We want you to know that this online service has been built with you in mind. So wherever, whenever, and however you're watching, welcome. We hope that something you see today really impacts you and inspires you to take a next step in your faith. We are so excited you're here. Let's get started.
Show us your glory. Let every burning heart be We're concluding our series called First. Is Jesus important or is he first? Does he have preeminence in your life? Is he above all things and before all things? And so we're wrapping this short little letter that Paul wrote almost 2,000 years ago to a church in Colossae who allowed the world to come in and influence their values and their beliefs. And where Jesus was at one time first, he was now just important to them. And the reason why we're doing this is because we believe that we have an incredible opportunity here at NewPointe. You see, in 2020, I believe there was a crisis. It was called COVID. 2021, there was the adapting. We were trying to adapt and trying to figure things out, not only in the church, but outside of the church. And then in 2022, there was that transition time. And now here we are, 2023. I believe it's a moment of great opportunity. And as they have said, you know, an opportunity has to be seized in the lifetime of that opportunity. And so we have a window to be able to seize this. And so here's what I've been asking the people of NewPointe. Basically two goals. One is the primary goal is 100% engagement, that you would be engaged, that you would participate, that you would listen to the messages, that you would ask God to speak to you, that you would be fully engaged and ask him, God, are you really first in my life, or are you just important? And then secondly, to embrace our mission advancement goal. And you can go to our website, newpointe.org, and you can find out more information about our mission advancement and what we're asking people to do with First. And so I encourage you to do that. But right now, what I want to do is I want to wrap up this letter that Paul has written to the church in Colossae. Paul gives them some things that they can hang on to ensure themselves that they remain aligned with who Jesus is and his supremacy and his preeminence and making sure that he is first. He says, be devoted to prayer. You know, prayer is communicating with God. Prayer is deeply personal. Do you know that God does nothing but in answer to prayer? And so he's saying you need to be able to have this lifeline of communication with God. You know, I talk with married couples quite a bit, and one of the first things that goes in a marriage is a lack of communication. They're just not talking anymore. And so it is with our relationship with God. So he says, if you want to stay in alignment, be devoted to prayer. But he says, be watchful. Be aware of what I'm doing. Be aware of my work so that you can join me in that, because God is always working in all places, in all areas. And then he says to be thankful. Why? Because God hates ingratitude. Matter of fact, there's severe consequences for the man or the woman who is ungrateful. Because what happens is you're basically saying that God is not good. And so he says, if you want to keep yourself aligned, be devoted to prayer, be watchful, be alert, and be thankful. And then the second word that I want to share with you is the word awareness. You see, when you're aligned with God, you need to be aware of everything that's going on. Paul continues as he wraps up his letter, and he says, and pray for us too, that God may open up a door for our message, so that we may be able to proclaim Christ, which I am in chains for, that I may be able to proclaim the good news clearly. So he's saying here that once you're in alignment, you need to be aware of what God is doing. And that means you need to be praying for those around you. You see, here at NewPointe, we are a multi-site church. That means that we have a church in Canton. We have a church in Worcester. We have a church in Millersburg. We have a church in Coshocton. We have a church in Cambridge. We have a church in T County, Tuscarawas County. We have a church online. You're listening to us right now. And what he is saying is that we need to pray for other people, that doors would be open all across these campuses and even online, and that we may be able to proclaim the good news clearly. And so Paul says, listen, if Christ is going to be first in your life, if you're going to keep him there, you need to be aligned. You need to be devoted to prayer. You need to be watchful. You need to be thankful. And then you need to be aware of what he's doing around you and in you and through you. And for us, that's in Eastern Ohio. And then finally, he gives us the word action. You need to have a bias towards action. Look what he says. He says, be wise in the way in which you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Wow. He gives us 3 ways in which we should act. And he's telling the church in Colossae, this is how you should act. This is how you should live. This is how you should behave when you're in alignment with me and you're aware of what I'm doing in the world. First of all is conduct. He says, be wise in the way in which you act towards outsiders. Do you know that your behavior speaks so loud I can't hear what you're saying? Do you realize that Jesus said, if they accept you, they'll accept him. And if they accept him, they'll accept the Father? You see, so much is on how you and I live our lives among people. And the Colossae church started to be a part of the world and allowed the world to influence their appetites and their attitudes and their actions. You see, we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. That deals with conduct. And then secondly, he says your choices. He says, make the most of every opportunity. Do you realize that time is precious? Do you realize that time is here and gone? Do you realize that life is but a vapor? Do you realize that you can get more money, but you can't get more time? You can't save time. You can't borrow time. You can't make time. And so he's saying, make the most of your opportunities. You have opportunities in your life to make a difference for Christ. And he says, seize these moments. Don't take them for granted. And then finally, he says, conversation. He says, let your conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. You see, these people who had come to know Christ, they were living among a culture that didn't recognize Christ. There were the Jews and there were the Romans, the Gentiles. And he said, as you have conversations with them, be full of grace, be kind, be gentle, be loving, be accepting, and then season your conversation with salt, with truth. He's not saying back away from truth. He's just saying don't use truth as a club. And so many people have. So many people have. And he says that's not how Jesus came. Jesus came full of grace and full of truth. Do you know that Jesus was the most accepting human being who's ever walked on the face of the earth? He accepted people right where they were, and then he invited them to have a conversation, and that's where he seasoned it with salt. And that's what we must be. That's what we must be. And so Paul would say, be action-oriented. Be one who has a bias towards action and demonstrate it in your conduct, in your choices, and in your conversation. Now, Paul wraps up his letter and he lists 8 to 10 different people. And the reason why he lists them is because they partnered with him in the gospel. And guess what? 2,000 years later, we know who they are. We know who they are. Wouldn't it be great for your name to be listed? Think if your name was listed. And 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when people talked about NewPointe, your name was mentioned because you were one who kept Christ above all things and before all things. You were making a commitment to put him first in your life. 2 people who are like that are good friends of mine, Jerry and Chris Weaver. And I want you to hear their story. Now, here's what you need to understand. They're not perfect people, but their heart, their purpose is to have Christ at the center of their life and to make him first. And God has used them in incredible ways to be able to help NewPointe continue to reach not only Eastern Ohio, but literally around the world. Check this out.
Well, our main work is transportation. We started that when we were young. We built it and grew it, and it was a successful company. But until we put God first, until we realized it was God's company, and all we are is stewards. The trust that we have now, that we know it's His, He will take care of all things. Are we perfect? Are we perfect stewards? No. But we try to be the best stewards we can be.
My dad, one of the things he always taught me was to tithe. I think when you tithe and you put God first that way, everything else just falls into place. For us, there were times we started out with 2 trucks. There were times when we didn't even know how we were going to make payroll. We actually had a line of credit back then. We even borrowed on the line of credit to tithe.
So yes, when we first started being stewards, we were like, we still tried to take it on ourselves and still tried to fix it ourselves, which we have accountability, but knowing that God is the ultimate, there was almost an inner peace, like it'll be okay.
How does that affect you personally? I mean, is there joy? Is there being able to say, hey, you know what? God's used us. God's blessed us to be a blessing, and to be able to see Him use you and work, because we all have to be willing. If we're not willing, there's many people who aren't willing.
Yeah.
I think as far as our personal life, we just pray about it. We only have 1 child. I love kids. I've always wanted more. We felt like here about 5 years ago that God was telling us to help kids. We didn't know what that was. I can remember we went to our small group. We kind of told them the story. We asked them to pray for us. We didn't know what that answer was. 3 years after that, I brought my parents to Florida. They lived down there for 30 years. So I was going to get them settled and come home. And that trip turned into 3 years. My dad got sick. My mom had Alzheimer's. And then our daughter had Lyme's. So we had 3 huge battles in our family, crying out to God, why? What are we doing? Why are we here? We finally got a knock on the door. We were flipping some homes down there, and they were interested in purchasing the house a couple doors down from where we live. Jerry came home and said it was a foundation that helps children, helps mothers who are pregnant. They might have been sex trafficking or just in a bad relationship and they're pregnant, so they don't want them to have an abortion. If we didn't listen to God and I wouldn't have stayed there and taken care of my dad, that was the whole reason, and that was our story of how we were to help children. So we actually gave them the home. I don't know how many babies born.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because we said when we bought this through a sheriff's sale that this will be the most profitable house that we've ever done. It was that lucrative of a deal, and it is.
I mean, we all process and we work things. God, why this, why that, whatever, and yet something inside of you, in spite of the challenge with your mom, with your dad, your only child, God spoke to you and you said, yes. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that.
You just turn it over to God because you can't do it. It's almost like it's not human. So I look back and I wonder, how did I ever accomplish that for a whole year? I was by myself, and it's only through God that you can do it.
I would probably say, through Tiff's story in her life has taught us so much, because she's a great inspiration to us. She never got down. That she told us. Did she get down? I'm sure she did. But to never give up. And then to give up her favorite thing in life that she loved doing was basketball. And then to still have the will, of doing what she's doing, and she still battles Lyme's all the time, but she doesn't give up.
So Would you say that you learning to trust God with your finances and with your business has been the largest thing that contributed to you to learn to trust God in times like that?
We never had to worry. We were blessed, so financially we never had to worry, but of going through these chapters in life. But it's not like it was plentiful, but it was always there.
He's just always there. He gets you through every situation when you don't know how you're gonna get through the day or the hour. He's just there for you.
Thanks again for joining us today. We hope you heard something today that has inspired you to follow Jesus, maybe for the first time, or maybe grow in your relationship with him by taking a next step in your faith journey. If you've been around NewPointe much at all, you probably noticed that next steps are a big deal around here. If you're ready to take your next step, or you would just like more information, visit newpointe.org/nextstep. And while you're there, check out our in-person and online options for Discover NewPointe. It's another great place to learn about taking your next step. If you made a decision for Jesus today, or just need someone to talk to, we'd love to hear about it and want to be there for you. Feel free to reach out to us through DM, comment below, or by visiting our website at newpointe.org/contact us. We hope something that you've heard today has impacted and inspired you. If so, would you share it with a friend? This service in the ministry of NewPointe is only made possible thanks to the generosity of others. So if you would like to partner with us in inspiring people to follow Jesus, visit newpointe.org or download our mobile app to give there. If you already give, we want to thank you for that. Your faithful giving is making an incredible impact. To see more content like this, please follow us on our social channels and like and subscribe to keep up to date with everything NewPointe. Once again, thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a great week and we can't wait to see you again next time.